Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Economic Briefcase on Camnet TV. Today with me in the studio is my co-host, Mr. Noah Njapao. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Doc. How's been the week?
No, the week has been fine. Of course, today, the world has witnessed the loss of Queen Elizabeth II. I don't know if we are going to have Queen Charles or it's King George. So I think for the next 1 week we are going to be busy with funerals, and I want to give a leakage. As she's going to be buried, as they are celebrating her life, you are going to see one of the guys that is going to be carrying the coffins. I think there are 4 only, or 6. I'm not very sure, but one of them is my friend. That's how connected I am. So today, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to discuss the IMF and is there an alternative to the IMF? And with us in the studio is a person that needs no introduction. We have hosted him here before, and most of you know him. I think if you are not a millennial, you know him over a decade. He's been in economic policy advocacy analysis, and today he will help us understand what this devil called, or the angel called the IMF is all about. Mr. DODIA, good evening.
Good evening, Doc. It's good to be here with you once again.
Yeah, thank you very much for accepting to come here at short notice. I know Pastor Chiruba has an influence.
Yes. The spirits are on your side,
Yeah, so as per tradition, we are going to first jump into what the market says, what the current exchange rates, commodity prices. Mr. Noah Njapao, over to you.
So the market update as of today, the 8th of September. Let's look at how the quarter is faring against the 4 major currencies. The quarter closed off trading at 15 kwacha, 53 ngwe. The pound closed off selling at 17 kwacha, 84 ngwe. The euro closed off selling at 15 kwacha, 42 ngwe. The rand closed off selling at 89 ngwe. Selected metal prices delayed by a day on the London Metal Exchange. Aluminium closed off selling at $2,230.50 per ton. Copper closed off selling at $7,730 per ton. Zinc closed off selling at $3,171 per ton. Lead closed off selling at $1,895 per ton. Tin closed off selling at $20,525 per ton. Nickel closed off selling at $21,450. Crude oil prices. WTI crude closed off selling at $87.04. Brent crude closed off selling at $93.04. That's all we had today on the market update. We see some trends there.
So it's 9 ngwe per rand. Is it the time to go to South Africa now?
Oh, absolutely. You can go there and get change. Usually when you want to buy something, we need a 3 kwacha or 6 kwacha to add up. Now you give a 1 kwacha, you actually get change. Yes.
What does that actually mean for South African businesses operating right here in Zambia that import most of their?
Well, for export markets, and South Africa is a big exporter to the rest of Africa, they begin to experience the positive change that China does with the rest of the world. In other words, we who are Zambians, who have we know it's 89 ingwe to 1 rand, it means we can buy more with our kwacha. So we'll be encouraged to import from South Africa. So all these food products you are seeing in our supermarkets, they're getting cheaper. But that, to the South African economy, it means the exports grow. And if exports grow in South Africa, they're going to show some good figures for trade surpluses based on their weaker rand.
So if I wanted to buy a boat in South Africa at 160,000 rands, those days I needed maybe 165,000 kwacha.
Yes.
Now I need maybe 150.
Exactly.
That is the implication.
Yes.
And today's topic, by the way, dear viewers, you can share your if you're watching on Facebook, just tell your friends to turn on. Today's topic is something that is very, very important. Those watching us on YouTube, you can also do the same. Those joining us via various satellite platforms or TVs, Topstar. You can also tell your neighbor that we are on. You can also participate in the program by calling in on the numbers that are appearing below the screen. You can also send your text messages and we'll be able to react to them. IMF package. Where are we coming from? Let's first talk, before we talk about the IMF, where are we coming from as a country? Maybe 2010 to today.
To date, yes. Well, we have been largely, well, let's say from independence, we've been largely influenced by the British Commonwealth and the British government. And as you earlier said at the beginning of the program, the British government or the British people have lost their queen. She reigned for 70 years.
Wow.
And this is our lifetime. A person like me,
yes.
when I was born, I
queen.
found that the queen was already there. And, for all you know, I could have died day before yesterday and I would have left the same queen sitting on the throne. So
seen about 15,
she's seen 15 prime ministers come and go.
And 7 Zambian presidents.
Yes.
And 14 United States
president. So you can see that for the new British Prime Minister, she was able to be given the opportunity to become Prime Minister by the Queen days before the Queen passed away. That's quite something. And going forwards, I think the British people, of course, are going to be seeing a king rather than a queen. The Queen Elizabeth took over from her father, King George. So we're going to have a king now, and I'm sure Prince Charles has been waiting most of his life to one day become the king. Of course, not eagerly waiting,
yes,
because it would mean the loss of his mother. But there you go, he's also an elderly person, probably in his 80s, and going to become king in the next few days, next few months. But of course, our condolences go out to the British people and of course to the British Commonwealth, which is 50-odd countries. But this is where human beings are not anywhere near God, because God doesn't die. Human beings are born and human beings die. So no matter where you are, whether you are president, whether you're queen, whether you're king, the day will come when you have to leave. And sadly, today is the day we see the queen go. And life must go on. And for Zambia, we were in a situation where in the last 10 years, we've seen our economy deteriorate. If you remember, we had the Jubilee 2000 campaign some 20 years ago, and we were fighting for debt write-off, and we managed to achieve complete debt write-off. And you remember acronyms like HIPIC,
yes.
Highly Indebted Poor Country. Those were acronyms we used that time, and eventually we did away with them. And within the last 10 years, we've rapidly been able to come back to an unsustainable debt situation. When we were writing off debt in 2000 with the Jubilee 2000 campaign, our debt was somewhere in the region of $6 to $7 billion. Today, we are looking at a debt of $17 billion, and that's the foreign debt. The domestic debt, over 200 billion kwacha, translates to about $13 billion. So collectively, domestic and foreign debt is around $30 billion. That's huge. So we've been able to deteriorate rapidly between 2000 and now in the last 2 2 years. And we've seen this. We've seen life become much more difficult. We've seen a kwacha which had become millions. You know, there were times when you and I were earning 4 million kwacha, 5 million kwacha as a salary. And then we had to, rebase it by removing 3 zeros so that we could get to numbers that calculators could handle. Because most of the calculators were failing. And kids could understand. But there we go. We got back to around 5 kwacha to $1 at the time of rebasing. That would have been around 2012, somewhere there, 2013. And in 10 years, we've been able to move from 5 kwacha to $1 to as high as 25 kwacha to $1 last year, and now sitting at 15 kwacha. So our economy has done very badly, and we've messed up clearly. And I think to reinforce it, if you look at the update on the debt situation, which was drawn up by the Ministry of Finance and was put in the public domain in the last week or so, we've seen that over the last 10 years, all we've been able to do is get a huge external debt to GDP ratio, where our external debt started off at about 30% of GDP and went as high as close to 80% of GDP, sits at somewhere around 70% now of GDP. That's huge. We've just been taking debt, and this is over the last, just the last 5 years. We look at our external debt service to revenue ratio. In other words, what part of the revenue is being used to service debt? In 2015, it was around 10%. In other words, 10% of our budget was allocated towards debt servicing. Now, it's sitting at just under 50%. In other words, the money we are collecting, 50% of it, close to 50%, 48%, is being used to service debt, and very little is being left to finance, other economic activities and national development. So we saw ourselves really getting into very deep and dangerous waters from around 2011, 2012, because that's when we took on the first Eurobonds. We issued Eurobonds for $750 million. 2 years later, we issued for about $1.25 billion. And then 2 years after that, another $1 billion. So bringing it up to $3 billion of debt. And the first Eurobond, which was actually a dollar bond, I don't know why we call it a Eurobond, matures and must be paid this month in September 2022. And 2 years from now, we've got to face the 1.25 billion. 2 years after that, the 1 billion. So we are definitely on a very, very difficult trajectory over the last 10 years. To the extent where we're sitting here today talking about an IMF package, which has been publicly, fondly referred to as an IMF bailout package of $1.3 billion.
So with that background, maybe first, before I say if we have an alternative, a lot of people are wondering, so we have gotten 1.3 billion, we're increasing on our debt. So what is this facility all about?
Well, as you know, the IMF didn't come yesterday. They were not invited. We have to be very careful. IMF don't just come on their own. You invite them, you apply. And we've been, as a nation, we've been speaking to the IMF for at least 2 years, from around 2020, 2019, thereabouts, when the COVID pandemic, really registered, was in 2020. From 2020, we recognized that we were in debt distress. We had unsustainable debt, and we were struggling with our budget. In 2021, our budget debt servicing was about 46 billion kwacha. In 2022, it has gone up to 78 billion kwacha. So clearly, there was need to find some mechanism to deal with debt. And of course, when the IMF are invited, the first thing they do is homework, due diligence. What's going on in this country? What's happening? They found out that our debt was unsustainable. They found out that even as now in this period which we are in, the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic undermined our economy, and now the Ukraine-Russia war has brought new challenges. High fuel prices, high fertilizer prices, high price of cooking oil, high price of soya bean. These are the kinds of things that we've been relying on. You know, most of us who have been suffering to eat beef have decided that, well, soya bean is you think you are eating mince meat, but it's not there. And so, Zambia then started looking towards a debt service suspension initiative, which the World Bank offers. And this data is all in this bulletin, which was, printed by the Ministry of Finance to give us an idea of where we are. So what took place, of course, what started to happen now is that we're saying that because we are in this distressed situation, it's necessary for us to first of all, to take stock of what we are doing and manage, have somebody who can help us to look at the debt and manage it. And you remember, we hired an advisor, a financial advisor, with the idea that they could help. They could see things that we can't see, which is a bit strange, because generally, if you go hunting, the visitor to the forest will ask those hunters in the forest and say, now, what should I watch out for? And the hunter will say, the animal is there, you can't see it, but I can see it. So strangely enough, we, for some reason, could not see the problems. We needed some advisor. My thinking is that the role of the advisor was not really to give us any new information. It was to pass on a message to the Western countries to whom we had this debt, that one of your own is here looking at us and managing us, so that you feel confident that we are doing something positive in terms of going to respond to paying off your debt. And we do that even in business, So I think the legal financial advisor was basically just a confidence builder, private European company. We then looked at moratoriums on debt. The problem with moratoriums is that they just postpone the pain. So suffering the pain today, you will suffer it tomorrow. It might even be worse than it would have been today. We looked at cancellation of projects that we felt that these projects are loan-based. So if it's possible to cancel them, these are the kinds of initiatives we started taking at the end of 2019 going into 2020. We looked at restructuring public debt. And restructuring public debt is in two ways, Part of it is dealing with external debt. The other part is dealing with domestic debt, paying contractors, paying suppliers of food to our armed forces and to our prisons and government and schools and hospitals and so forth. We then started to look at how we could talk to the private debt givers, the creditors that we owed money to. And these are those bond holders, the 3 billion, the 1.25 and the 1 billion. So meaning the people who are holding $3 billion of bonds for Zambia, and say, is there a way we can negotiate? And of course, this was an effort in futility. Why do I say that? It's because private bond holders are not using their own money. So if I'm running a pension fund, I'm taking pensioners' money and I'm going to invest it in bonds in Zambia. There's no such thing as write-off. There's no such thing as forgiveness. There's no such thing as even freezing of interest, which to a bond holder is not interest, it's a yield.
Yes.
right? In other words, it's a profit. Otherwise, why am I giving it to you if I'm not going to make a profit? So that one, there's no negotiation. And of course, I say it's an exercise in futility, because immediately government approached these bondholders. They turned around and said, no, forget about it. This was in November 2020. As far back as that, said, no, we want our money. When it's due, find it and pay us. We were then applied for the debt service suspension initiative from the World Bank, which the World Bank and IMF said, well, let's see what we can do about it. But the ones that are kind of coming to the table on their own is the Chinese, because some of the Chinese loans, they've frozen interest on the loans. They've said, okay, we're not going to do any more interest. And in terms of debt servicing, there's dialogue around it. And then, of course, we applied to the IMF and said, look, we need some money, because we feel that, yes, we owe a lot of money, but we still need money in order to run the key areas of our economy, to avoid a situation where the economy collapses and implodes. And the areas that the IMF have agreed to work with Zambia are in the areas of social support, the social cash transfers, the farmer input support programs, and so forth, that help the poor people to continue to survive. And politically, it's a very good thing to do, because that's 80% of your voters. And if you make your voters starve and they can't eat, they're going to turn against you. You've seen what has happened. Well, I mean, let's look at recent experiences. Sri Lanka.
Yes.
I think you all saw it on the media, how people stormed, was it the vice president's palace or office, whatever, because people were just failing to make ends meet. So, of course, the social security side, I think, was extremely important. But, of course, the IMF are also saying, well, we can help you to take care of the vulnerable, but we also want to help you to do the right things. So the money coming from IMF is now looking at things like good governance structures, passing good laws, maybe even amendments to our constitution that is going to bring about better governance, transparency, and accountability. Probably we're targeting things like the access to information bill, the public debt bill that was sitting before Parliament, where government must seek authority from the Parliament before they can get into more debt. But institutions like the Anti-Corruption Commission, the Drug Enforcement Commission, the Financial Intelligence Center, the police itself, the National Prosecution Authority, where the DPP is, the Public Protector. Now, these need to be strengthened, and they need to become more independent, so that you don't have a situation where an investigation is taking place of corruption by ACC, and when it gets to the DPP's office, you find that it's not being taken to court, or it's being treated very casually. So these are the areas that the IMF has been looking at in their package to Zambia. And as we've seen, it's $1.3 billion over 3 years. That's roughly $400 million a year. Now, just to get a sense of what is 1.3 billion, let's just take, already we have agreed that our debt is around $30 billion. But let's look at a current challenge. 78 billion kwacha being paid for 2020 debt servicing. If you take 78 billion and divide it by 15 to get kwacha, to turn it to dollar, it's $5.2 billion. Somebody's helping you with 1.3. Your commitment in 2022 is 5.3. So it's a quarter of what you want, a third of what you need. So clearly that money is not anyway going to go towards debt servicing. It's much more about keeping the country safe through supporting the social sector to prevent civil strife within the country, and also keeping the government focused on being efficient, there being transparency, there being accountability, and fighting corruption. So this is basically what the IMF package is all about.
So, okay, go ahead.
Those sound like good, I don't know what I can call them, conditions, or if they're going to work with the poor, social cash transfer, and they require that to be diverted to those few things. But now the question is, what's the uproar about? Some people are saying some conditions are harsh, some conditions are harsh.
Yes, you see, they always say the devil is in the detail. The IMF have talked about what the finances that they're providing are all about, okay? But then they're talking about government needing to grow the economy. And for government to need to grow the economy, the IMF is beginning to say that, well, look, you need to collect more taxes. You need to expand the tax base. You need to be more aggressive in getting domestic resources. And to this extent, the document issued by the Ministry of Finance focuses on enhanced revenue mobilization. That's just nice words for being more aggressive towards collecting taxes, broadening the tax base, you know, starting to tax marketeers and I don't know who else, where else we can find money, because the economy is not that big when you're looking at formal businesses. We are looking at enhancing the monetary policy. I would like to explore that one, because I think that the monetary policy should be beyond trying to balance the dollar with the kwacha, beyond playing around with liquidity, whether it's dollar liquidity or kwacha liquidity. These are the things Bank of Zambia does to try and keep the dollar and the kwacha in check. When there's too much kwacha, the Bank of Zambia will increase the statutory reserves so that they mop up money. When there's too little kwacha, the Bank of Zambia will reduce the statutory reserves so that more of the money goes into circulation. But, you know, government is looking to improve the productivity of key sectors. The government must foster inclusive growth. Now, these are things that are not done without money. Mm-hmm. You need money to make these things happen. So I think the IMF's prescription, and has been like that in past years, is like a surgeon. When you are in critical condition, you are a victim of a road traffic accident, the surgeon is going to make some very quick assessments. I need to protect the head. Without a brain, this person is dead. I need to protect the heart, the lungs, the vital organs. That foot, I can amputate it. That arm, I can amputate it. So, and when you look at the economy, what are the vital organs in Zambia? The vital organs in Zambia is that, and I think the president highlighted it when he was in opposition, he was campaigning under UPND, he talked about the Zambian economy being in the hands of just a few people. He mentioned it again on the 24th of August when he was being inaugurated, and mentioned it again at the opening of the 13th National Assembly. And this is where the challenge is that those few people that are producing 80% of our GDP are 6 or 7 mining companies, 5 or 6 industrial companies like cement, sugar, some food products, and so forth. And then another 8 or 7 or 10 farming community, the wheat growers, the rose growers, and so forth, which are exporting, the beef producers. That's about 20, 25, 30 companies. And the IMF is going to be like a surgeon, which is to say, these ones, look after them. Give them red carpet treatment. Make sure that these institutions, these companies, do not collapse, because then your GDP is going to go down the drain. as far as your Tuntemba companies, small SMEs and so forth, if an SME backs up today, so what? You find another one after 2 years, after 3 years. So unfortunately, politically, that doesn't work. Because if you look at the 20 or 30 companies that are the champion, the drivers of our economy, they are foreign companies. Those people vote in their own countries, whether it's South Africa, Nigeria, UK, Australia, China, India, Switzerland. They vote in their own countries. The people who vote here are the Zambians. So for government, you've got this dilemma where if you support those big multinationals, you're going to have a huge problem with your own people. Hence, that focus, that $400 million per year going towards social sectors is to keep the sanity of the economy. But it's a temporary solution. You're talking of 3 years. 3 years will pass just now. Here we are, we had elections just the other day. 1 year is already clocked. So time goes very quickly. And we need to see sustained economic growth. And sustained economic growth means we need to see growth of Zambian investment. We need to see Zambians taking equity in this economy. Zambians who can stand the test of time. The good thing about a Zambian, you make millions of dollars, you don't go and buy a mansion in Hollywood. You buy a mansion here.
Yeah, right here. You spend it here.
New Kasama, Lusaka West. You buy your mansion here. You invest in your own country. So the revenue remains in Zambia. And you continue to recapitalize the economy. Now that gives us resilience. And so we need to see that kind of investment that is going to make sure that Zambian companies are going to grow, that Zambian companies are going to become the taxpayers of the near future, and that Zambian companies are the ones that are going to generate the resources through ZRA to be able to service and clear our debt.
So is that a suggestion to move away from too much of social spending into productive spending?
I don't think so. Again, the problem is when you start using words like subsidy. The word subsidy means giveaway. You see? If you see somebody on the street and every day you give that person 10 kwacha, 10 kwacha, 10 kwacha, in 30 days you have given them 10 times 30. It's 300 kwacha. Yet, you could also say, I'm going to give you 300 kwacha. Go and buy this little machine which will help you to produce my brooms. And you can sell brooms. And you don't have to be asking me for 10 kwacha every day. So, we have to differentiate between subsidy, which is just giving away without expecting anything in return, and investing in our economy, investing in our people. And so for me, when I look at a product like the Farmer Input Support Program, I'm sure it's a time-bound program. If you get on that program, you should be running on that program for 3 years, maybe maximum 5 years. But the idea is that in that period, you've gained enough economic power to be able to not need a Farmer Input Support Program for you. So in other words, you are graduating Zambian farmers from being small farmers, peasant farmers, into semi-commercial farmers who can stand on their own 2 feet. So it's not a subsidy. But the question is, if it's not happening, if we're not getting there, let's not throw a good program because we are corrupt and we're failing to implement it correctly.
So in the IMF, from what I've read, there are certain conditions. 1, remove agricultural subsidies. 2, electricity subsidies.
Yes.
Fuel subsidies. Of course, they're talking about removing certain VAT exemptions on certain products. How is that going to affect?
Well, first of all, we've always argued, can somebody prove that there are subsidies on fuel?
Or in electricity?
Well, electricity, it's a glass half empty, half full. Because we brought in foreign investors or private investors in the electricity subsector of the energy sector, Iteshi Power Station, Mamba, There are 1 or 2 in the northern province. There's another one coming up in western province at Ngonia Waterfalls. What you have done is you have now created a mechanism where the private investor is saying, I want 11 cents per kilowatt hour as a private company. I want a power purchase agreement with ZESCO at 12 cents per kilowatt hour. Otherwise, this business is not sustainable to me. Now, if ZESCO was giving you and me that electricity at 5 cents per kilowatt hour, and they were saying, we are doing it because we are trying to sustain Zambian industry, right? But because you brought in a player who has now come in as a profit maker at 12 cents per kilowatt hour, ZESCO can now say we are subsidizing because we are buying the power from Iteshi power station at 12 cents and we are selling it to you at 5 cents. We're making a loss of 7 cents. We're subsidizing. But you created a mechanism to make a subsidy, you see? And one can argue the other way. Is it a subsidy? Or is it the one who's charging you 12 cents per kilowatt hour, you are subsidizing his business? Yes. You're not subsidizing the Zambian, you're subsidizing the investor. Because the investor needs more money than what ZESCO is paying.
He's charging. Cost reflective, how much he invested, he has to record.
Well, now this is where cost reflective comes in. Because cost reflective is one of those. If you are working for me as a CEO, and I say, how much will it cost for you to do your job? You can choose to drive a Mercedes-Benz, and then I'll give you a cost reflective salary. You can choose to live in a house in Kabulonga. So the cost of you is dependent on what you decide you are worth. So cost reflective tariffs can be manipulated. You see what I mean? If it's a high cost production area, why is it high cost? Because people are overpaid, they are given cars, they are given this, they are given that. It becomes a high cost. So it's debatable. But in short, yes, the IMF wants that the cost of producing electricity and transmitting it and distributing it, whether you are paying Mamba, you are using Mamba as your yardstick, or using Iteshi as your yardstick, that's what you should pay. Government should not be able to put any extra money in it. That's one. You talk of fuel prices, that whatever fuel prices come, oil prices dictate the fuel prices, that's what the Zambian should pay. But that is a recipe for disaster. It's the same thing as your wife giving birth and you tell that child, this child, you are going to sit outside, you're not coming in my house. Because to come in my house, I have to feed you, I have to buy you milk, I have to buy you my diapers, I have to send you to nursery school. I can't do this, you have to pay. So you allow that child to die, which is exactly what we are talking about. You know, we all send our children to school because we invest in the next generation. That's what it's about. And the IMF has got it upside down. They're looking at it as a subsidy. Who is going to run this economy if you and I as Zambians are going to be paying every month 2,000 kwacha for fuel? Every month 2,000 kwacha for electricity. Your salary is 5,000. You can't pay rent. You have to sleep under a cardboard box. You know, we have to be realistic. So for me, the IMF conditions are conditions that are going to keep the status quo. What is the status quo? That we must be a subsidized, not actually, we must be a basket case for the big investors in this country. Sorry, they must look after us.
Sorry to take you back on one point you made about the poor. So if the poor, some will argue actually, saying the companies use most this electricity, the fuel, and if we focus on the social spending, and we remove, sorry to use this word again, subsidies, remove subsidies, and all these prices skyrocket on fuel, electricity, it's because we've spent this much, or we're going to spend this much on social welfare. It won't really affect the poor, but it will affect the multi...
if you remove the subsidies.
Yes, is that myth correct?
First of all,
then you go and give 150 kwacha.
Let's look at what is on the ground today. Indeni is closed. Now I'm asking you, what subsidy is there on fuel? You're importing refined fuel, right? A tanker is going to Durban or to Nampula or in Beira in Mozambique or to Dar es Salaam, and they're bringing fuel, diesel. And that diesel is coming here and you're putting a price on top and say, where is the subsidy? That subsidy discussion we had during the days of bringing in commingled feedstock, pumping it from the ship to the container farm in Dar es Salaam, pumping it from the container farm through Tazama to Indeni, and then processing it in Indeni, and then people are saying, well, the costs of these all add up, right? And as far as I know, and we have failed to get any kind of clear analysis of this, as far as I know, there would be a levy charged for the fuel coming off a ship going into the container yard. There will be a levy for storing it there. There will be a levy for pumping it to Kapiri. There will be a levy for processing it, and then there will be a levy for selling it at the pumps. When I say levies, I mean these are, fuel levy, pumping levy. These are added charges. These are low-hanging fruits by government to just get revenues without having to chase 20 million Zambians to get that revenue. You are doing it just through the value chain of bringing in the fuel. At every point you are charging it, so your pump price ends up at 26 kwacha per liter, and yet if it were done in Dar es Salaam, it will probably be at 18 kwacha per liter. So the cost has been in the value chain. So if there was a subsidy, somebody needs to tell us that no, the cost of pumping used to be so much, but we as government decided that no, we are going to top it up. And that's why your fuel price has remained low. But we've not seen this.
Is it true? Is it correct to say we are subsidizing fuel when 40% of the price is excise duty, VAT,
that's
taxes?
what I'm trying to say. Subsidy means you are putting government money into a product so that the people can get it cheaper. That's what a subsidy is. But if you are making it expensive because you are charging an excise duty, a storage levy, a pumping levy, it will be a Tazama levy, Indeni levy, then all you are doing is you are taxing it. And the taxing is leading to higher costs. But maybe we shouldn't be discussing it academically, because academically is about pricing. We should talk about it practically. Practically, what it translates is this. Whether IMF say, remove this subsidy, do cost-reflective tariffs, do cost recovery, private sector players are like water in a bucket. Always finds a level. You never see water sitting at an angle. It's always balanced. So what happens is this, and we see this. If you've lived long enough to remember what Ndola was like 30, 40 years ago, there was a sign there, welcome to Ndola, industrial hub of the Copper Belt. Because in Ndola you are producing medicines. In Ndola we're producing all these cosmetics with Chisbropons and those. I'm even forgetting some of those names. We had Gamma Pharmaceuticals. You had No Group Plastics. You had a whole lot of manufacturers. There was Rover was there, and
Dunlop.
Yes, Dunlop was there, tires and everything. So what happened is we're going through a situation like this now, where they said no, tax this, remove that levy, do this, do that. And the private sector says, I don't even want the explanation. You can say what you like, you can justify. But for me, it is no longer viable for me to manufacture. So No Group Plastics or Gamma Pharmaceuticals would say, I'm shutting down my machinery because the cost of production is too high. I'm just going to import the drugs from abroad.
It becomes cheaper to import.
And yes, from employing 500 people in the factory, I'm now employing 15 people. Because I need a chap who can open the door of the warehouse for the truck to offload, and I need 10 people for lifting boxes to pack on trucks as it's being purchased from me. So I've I've saved a lot of money. I'm no longer paying so many workers. I don't have people coming with funeral allowances and this and that.
Supporting a football club
exactly. And you've seen it, that even the corporate spending,
yes.
it disappeared, when you have found football teams being supported. So this is what is likely to happen if we go down that road, that companies are going to close down. We've seen already, the overtures are there. You saw how in the beginning of this year we saw, and even last year, we saw things like potatoes being banned from being imported, onions, because our local producers are inefficient. The prices are too high. So they turn around and go to government and say, look, we are selling our onions at 150 kwacha per pocket. An onion is smaller than an egg. Those onions, first you look at them, are these masukus or what? And then you find out that they're onions. You see what I mean? And yet your neighbor is producing onions that are the size of oranges.
Almost the same price.
No, your neighbor's price is 80 kwacha. Yours is 150. So what do? You find that because it's an influential producer, they go to government and say, government, can you ban the import of onions? So what happens? The Zambian consumer is buying onions at 150 and they are substandard. Now, what value is that in terms of growing the economy? Nothing. Because the producer of onions gets away with it. He's producing a poor quality of onion at a very expensive price and is protected by government. So what happens? He becomes inefficient. He says, you can go wherever you want, but you're going to buy my onions.
There's no onions.
Yeah. And eventually he just becomes an extortionist, getting money from you for a very low quality product. So we need to be dealing with this very differently. We need to be saying, no, let's get down. You have come to ask for this protection. We're not giving you. We need to understand what's going on. Let us get a small team together, go and look, why is Zimbabwe producing onions or potatoes cheaper than Zambia? We're in the same geographic area. We are the same distance from the ocean.
Same rainfall.
There's something, there's something. Yes. And you'll find that maybe it's an electricity tariff. Maybe it's a fertilizer price. In Zimbabwe, the fertilizer is cheaper than in Zambia because government says we want to have a good agriculture industry. We are not putting any duty on.
You know what you have said.
So once you get to the root cause, then you can say, now let us see how we can help our people. But this thing of ban this, close this door, close that door, you just support inefficiency.
So Turkey is a manufacturing country. So what they have done, they get gas from Russia, cheap.
Yes.
They have got long-term contracts. Then they sell their electricity cheap to their manufacturing industry. Russians, they buy it expensive.
Yes.
So the wheat guys, they grow wheat in Russia.
Yes.
Pack it raw, take it to Turkey. Turkey makes flour and sell back to Russia.
Yes.
Because the Russians say, I can't operate a Chicago. It's too expensive for me, the energy.
Yes.
I think that's what you're talking about.
So it's these sort of things. Yes. And it's not, it's not so simple to say, oh, this one does like this. No, you have to do the homework. You have to study it. And you have to see where your competitive and comparative advantage is. We have signed the SADC Free Trade Area Agreement. We have signed the COMESA Free Trade Area Agreement. And recently, we signed the Continental Free Trade Area Agreement. According to the agreements, we are not supposed to tell a Zimbabwean company that you can't bring your product to Zambia. Mm-hmm. Because also the Zimbabweans cannot tell a Zambian exporter of, say, wheat, maybe we are producing more wheat than Zimbabwe, to take wheat to Zimbabwe. It should not be an issue. Yes. So if we are going to get into these regional integration programs, we have to be competitive. We have to look at our small and medium enterprise and say, how can we help them to grow? Now, it's not all gloom and doom. We have a ministry of technology and science. They ought to be looking at those grade 7 dropouts, grade 9 Form 2 dropouts, and even the grade 12 dropouts. I call them dropouts because they didn't get enough grades to go and do tertiary education. We should go back to the trades training institutes. Mm-hmm. Getting these young people to have skills, because the challenge we have in Zambia is that labor in Zambia is not respected. Why is it not respected? Why does an employer tell you, if you get out of my factory, get out of my thing? It's because he looks at you and says, what are you bringing? In fact, I'm looking after you. You come here and you sit around.
I can give you whatever I can give.
Yeah, I can give you a 500 kwacha, take it or leave it. Because what are you bringing to the table? You know, I run businesses, and believe me, as an engineer, when I have an engineering guy working for me, and we're doing a project for Ministry of Justice or something, we're doing local area network or something, that fellow doesn't come to work. I'm sending a driver to go and pick him up. I'm phoning him and he's saying, he's saying, boss, I'm at UTH with my wife and child. You know, the child is sick. I'll say, don't worry. I'm sending the driver. He's coming to pick you up, take you to the ministry where I'm going to make money out of. And the driver will wait at the hospital for your wife and child to be treated and take them home. Why am I giving him so much respect? It's not because I like him. It's because the man's making money for me. He's got a skill which I need. Now, this idea of saying, you employ me and pay me well, and I have no skill to offer you, that is a ridiculous contract, you see. So if we can make our Ministry of Science and Technology begin to focus on those type of things. Ministry of Small and Medium Enterprises, looking at how do you make Citizens Economic Empowerment Commission work for the small and medium enterprises to grow them into large enterprises of tomorrow. Then we are tackling the issue of economic diversification, domestic economic growth. And of course, the IMF is not saying it. I've not seen it anywhere there. They've not talked about getting value from the mining sector. They're very quiet on that one.
No, that one is silent.
You see? Because that's where the real money is. The $40 million per day that we are exporting, which is $1.2 billion a month, is as much, that IMF package is money that Zambia is generating in 1 month. You get my point?
Very true.
But what we're having is a situation where the money is flowing out into Europe and sustaining European economies. And here we are suffering because we have no capital to build our own economy. If you look at the 2022 national budget, 45% of the original national budget, which was 170 billion kwacha, right? 45% of it was revenue being generated by tax collection, fees, permits, fines, and so forth, and domestic borrowing. So that 45%, more than half is domestic borrowing. It's treasury bills and bonds. So very little is actually coming from ZRA collection, if you like. You see? Then you look at the other 55% of the budget. What is it coming from? It's coming from foreign grants and financing. It's coming from program loans. 40 billion kwacha program loans in the 2022 national budget. You are looking at a budget which is not sustainable. You can't have a budget where you are saying about 25% of the budget we will get from, we will fund through revenue collection. The rest of it we're either going to borrow from the banking system or we're going to get money from outside. You are running a very unsustainable economy. And I think our Minister of Finance has highlighted it very carefully. We're just re-emphasizing. But what does that mean? It means if we are working on that kind of a program, we shall never grow the Zambian economy. And what we need to do, and why I'm talking about this, is that we need to get to a stage where ZRA is collecting revenue from Zambian taxpayers equivalent to the amount of money we need to finance the budget. We don't have to borrow from for the budget. It must come from Zambian taxpayers. Now, if that's our goal, how do we do it? We have to facilitate and support the Zambian business to grow. And this is what China did. You know, in China, energy is state-controlled because they're saying, we are investing in our economy. You in Africa, you are calling it subsidizing. We were calling it investing. We want that in the next 20 years, we must be the biggest IT companies in the producers in the world. They have become that. We want that
in take advantage of the African Free Trade Area and all these other agreements, because the market will be too small here. We will be forced to move out.
Exactly. So we need to rethink the philosophy of economic development. The Western model has failed. Western Europe is in recession as we speak. So why do you want to fail somebody who has failed? You want to follow him. Doesn't make sense. You know, just because he speaks good English.
I'm sure you are in business and you can tell me that it's dangerous to even think of opening a company. For example, if you have a small shop and you want to expand 2 shops, you are going to get a health license, you know, 1 shop, another health license, you know, same company. Fire license in this outlet, fire license. So if you have 2, if you are paying 10,000, if I'm told there are 2 health licenses, one from Ministry of Health and another one from the local authority. Now, if you have 2 branches, all those branches have to pay equivalent amount.
Yes.
So how am I going to develop a business?
Well, if you look at, for example, a medical business, you have to get a license from the council, your trading license, your fire and health license. You then have to go and get a license from the regulator, because which is Health Professional Council of Zambia, or ZAMRA, Zambia Medicines Regulatory Authority, if you're a pharmacy. So you can see there's a multiplicity of regulators.
So if you have a hospital and a pharmacist there, you have to get both.
Yes. If you have a school, a university,
Yes.
you are registering with the Higher Education Authority, you are registering with Health Professional Council of Zambia,
Yes.
you are registering with General Nursing Council, you are registering with the Zambia Radiation Authority.
There's workers' compensation.
Those are even other ones. You know, you are registering with so many, because as a school, as a university, you have these different professions that you are developing. They're all coming on board. So Zambia adopted the idea of cost recovery fees. That's what they refer to them. I have argued, you have a budget. Ministry of Commerce, your budget is 15 billion kwacha for the year, to pay your workers, to buy your fuel for your transport. Why are you now coming to inspect my factory and charging me? I've already given you money for you to carry out that service. Why are you, so I'm paying you double. So the idea of cost recovery charges, it meant double taxation.
I remember when the toll fees came, I was against, you know, and actually I came to sit on the board of NRFA later. But I was a critic. You know why? Because if I want to go to Ndola today, this is my country. I have freedom of movement and I've paid taxes.
Yeah.
My car has paid road tax. Allow me to drive to Ndola. But no, I need to pay at Samba area there. I need to go and pay at Kabwe. I need to pay at Kafulafuta. And if I'm going to Kitwe, I need to go and pay between Kitwe and whatever to reach 4 toll gates.
Yeah.
Then the police will also be looking, is there a road tax? My friend, I've just paid 20. Which road tax are you asking for?
Yes, yes. But you see, if we look at the bigger picture, yes, you know, I mean, you know, there are these initiatives like toll gates and so forth. I believe that these are all red herrings. Red herrings means you are trying to chase more money. You have to look at big money. The big money is copper, exports, earnings. It needs to come in. So when we are looking at this IMF package, I want to come back to it, because the Minister of Finance said to the nation, we are signed this thing. There are 2 things we are going to have to do. Number 1 is we must go and negotiate with the creditors. The money we owe. And find, it's not IMF doing it for you. You have to go and negotiate and say, look, we owe you this amount of money. How can we pay it over a longer period than we had agreed? Is it possible for you to stop interest on it, etc., etc., and negotiate some positive mechanism? That's 1. 2 is we need to have a strategy for economic growth outside the IMF arrangement. What's the strategy for economic growth? Because all your money is going towards debt servicing. We have just launched the 8th National Development Plan, which looks at creating industry, looking at, expanded employment, looking at productivity of the nation in terms of business. Where are the mechanisms that are going to make this happen? They're not there. So they're not even speaking to each other. The IMF program is, as I said earlier, it's looking at the big investors that are in Zambia, look after them, don't allow them to go away. And then, of course, the investors become very aggressive. And they start saying things like, if you remove the VAT, which we claim, we're going to close down our operation. That's why we failed to introduce goods and services tax some 2-3 years ago.
Yes.
You see? Because you are being threatened by the investor. I believe
and
that...
I kept on asking them, look, you pay this tax. Yes, we pay.
Yes.
And you want it back. Yes. What if we just remove it? No, you can't remove it.
You can't, yes.
But I've asked you, do you pay VAT? Yes. Do you come and claim it back? Yes, I claim it back. So why do you want government to be collecting it from you? Let's just remove it.
Yes.
So that you don't have, you're not owed anything. No. It has to be there.
Yes. Well, you see, and again, this is just common business practice. If I'm dealing with you, I want to buy your car, you are desperate. You even start by telling me, I haven't paid school fees, they might evict me from my house.
Yes.
And you say, I want 80,000 kwacha for this Benz. Already, the very fact that you've told me you are in trouble, I'm going to offer you 40,000 kwacha. Because I can see you are desperate. So I'm going to squeeze you as much as I can. That is standard business practice. We must not say this person is evil, that person is uncaring. That person has come to make money. That you need to understand. They didn't come as a messiah. They didn't come as a do-gooder. They came to make money. So as a nation, we also need to stand firm and say, you mining companies, these are the rules and regulations that we want you to follow from now on. You don't like it, there's the door. Leave. There's other mining companies that are willing to take over your space. With good copper prices today, which company is going to refuse to invest in Zambia?
They all want to come.
So the minister has been very clear that this is a short-term arrangement. It's not a bailout package. It has another value that we've not talked about. We've talked about $400 million, which will take care of social services and governance and fight against corruption and so forth. And that's very good. But what the real value of the IMF package is the same value of Lazard, the consultant. It's to give confidence to the international community. We, the IMF, who's well respected, we are part of the Bretton Woods institutions, we are sister to the World Bank, our president is the US treasurer, or rather now it's a European thing, you know. So all these Western financial institutions and Western economies are behind us as IMF. The G7, the G20, they are behind us. So when we are hand-holding Zambia, don't be aggressive towards them. We are helping them. Take it easy. Give them a chance. Give them breathing space. That's the biggest value of our relationship with IMF. Because as I said, 1.3 billion is meaningless. But it is the relationship. That when we have this relationship, we know we've got a 5-year cycle. In this 5 years, we must do some magic to be able to say, IMF, thank you very much. You had our back during this difficult time. Now we are able to do it alone. And that strategy, to me, is a strategy where we need to look at our real wealth. You know, I've said this before. If we're exporting $40 million of copper per day, 1.2 billion per month, 14.4 billion a year, plus another 3 billion of other exports, we're looking at $17 billion worth of exports. Our imports is somewhere around 5, maybe 6. So take away 18, from 18 billion, take away 6 billion of imports. You've got a trade surplus of 12. $12 billion trade surplus is a trade surplus of 1 billion per month. That's not a poor country. That's not a highly indebted poor country. It's a highly indebted country that is not using its resources wisely.
Yes.
So we need to change that dynamic. And to change that dynamic means to have the courage to tell foreign investors that if you can't follow our rules and regulations, you have no business doing business in Zambia.
Ladies and gentlemen, you are watching Camnet TV and we're discussing the IMF package and if there's an alternative for it in Zambia. We are now opening the phone lines. You can call us on the numbers that are appearing on the screen. You can also send us messages on the same numbers. Director, do we have any messages? I'm sure economy won't improve, living cost too high. John Indola. Good evening, Doc. Very educative program. I have a question for guest Mr. YOUSUF DODIA. 1. If you were in the boots of the current government today, could you have gone to the IMF as the last solution to solve our economic problems? 2. If IMF was not the solution, what alternative could you have?
Well, I believe that the IMF is kind of a necessary evil for short-term solution, just to get us on a stable position. I think even the IMF themselves say it. Our role here is to try and bring stability to this economy, so that the economy can be ready to move in the right direction. But I think that as a nation, we have for far too long allowed our resources to leave this country with nothing behind. When you look at the mineral royalty taxes, they are very small compared to what is going out. And I don't know whether mineral royalty taxes have now been made tax deductible, meaning if you made a loss the other year, you can use the mineral royalty taxes to offset.
I think there is loss carryover.
So,
yes.
yeah, so you know, then at the end of the day, what are you getting? So the real benefit that we get from the mining companies now is the jobs they are creating, because they are creating jobs for Zambians, and through those Zambians, there's some pay as you earn. Although with a pay as you earn that only starts after 4,500 kwacha salary, there could be very few people in the higher brackets. Contractors that are doing jobs for the mines could be benefiting from it. But really, it's not enough.
Our first caller.
Hello?
Hello, your name and where you calling from?
Hello?
Hello, your name and where you calling from? We can hear you.
Hello? Hello?
We can hear you.
Hello? Hello?
Hello, we can hear you. Go ahead and make your contribution.
Hello?
We can hear you.
Hello? Hello?
Go ahead.
No, my name is Fraser Katali, calling from Mrs. Compounding. I need to find out about the IMF. How many years do that man engaged for IMF? How many years? Then it's true. I need to find out about that man that engaged. Is it you can make those 4 or 5 years in Zambia? So can you ask Zambia to make a branch, a big branch, that can produce the over here in Zambia? Then another thing, why do we want this IMF, but we have a lot of resources here in Zambia? What is the problem? No, thanks. I need to find out from you.
Yeah, well, you know, I mean, there's somebody speaking some wisdom, you know.
Yes.
We have resources, and for some reason we are allowing those resources to just disappear, and we forget about it. You know, people are borrowing our money. Zambia's biggest trading partner is Switzerland. This is where 90% of the copper goes, academically, because the copper is going to China, to India,
yes,
but the invoices are coming from Switzerland. So a company in Switzerland will go and borrow that money, go and buy fuel for Zambia, and come and sell it to Zambia with your own money. And I remember speaking to former Minister of Finance, Ngandu Magande, some years ago when he was Minister of Finance. And that time we had a bank, I won't mention the name, but there was a bank that was operating at every customs post in Zambia. And you couldn't pay cash to ZRA. You had to go to that bank, buy a banker's check.
Yes.
So pay them 10,000 kwacha, they give you the check, that check you go and take the ZRA. So there's no cash changing hands. The cash is sitting in that bank. You know what that bank was doing with that money? Buying treasury bills. So I said to the minister, I said, Minister, you are giving a local bank your money, And instead of them giving your money and putting it in your bank account, they are using it to buy treasury bills, which means they're loaning you your own money. So I was quite surprised about it. But this is exactly what we are doing. The resources of Zambia are going to Switzerland. The white person, the European person in Switzerland is borrowing our money, going to buy fuel and coming to sell it to us. Going to buy fertilizer and coming with our own money.
Definitely. Simply put, it's sold on that market, but the product comes straight from here and goes to the buyer. So the value is reflecting on that market instead of this market.
Yes. So this is something that I think our caller is looking at. Now, he talked about copper. And this is another big issue. Right now, any of us here can open a copper processing plant in Zambia. When I say processing, make cables or copper ornaments or whatever. Where are you going to buy the copper from?
Nowhere.
There's nobody in Zambia selling copper because the copper is pre-sold to those companies in Switzerland. Just like somebody was talking of doing a pipeline from Angola to Zambia and say, you can bring in oil from Angola. Go to Angola. That oil is not owned by the Angolan government. It's owned by ExxonMobil. It's owned by Shell, it's owned by Caltex. And that offshore sea drilling is being done in the sea. As the oil comes out, it goes into a tanker and it goes off to North America and Europe. That pipeline becomes a white elephant. What are you going to bring from there? So these are some of the realities that we need to look into. And as long as we continue operating the way we have operated in the past, the future is very bleak. We need to break this hold that Africa is only a place where you can produce raw materials and they should go out. And you should buy them back again at 10 times the price. Because the amount of copper in a switch, these electric switches,
yes,
is probably worth about maybe less than 10 ingwe of copper. But you are buying that switch for how much? 30 kwacha.
Yes.
So look at the value addition.
Somebody is
selling you these electric switches.
10 kwacha. Yeah. 150.
150. You see? There you go.
You just spend it, not the tropical soil formation, not the white one. Just make it grey. It will be 200.
There we go. So we need to change that around. And the way we have to change it around is we need to have the courage to break the traditional cycle that continues to exploit Africa. None of our advisors from outside come to us and say, but you've got all these copper export earnings. Why are you not harnessing it? And harnessing it does not mean you take money away, because maybe as Zambians we think we're going to grab money of the mining. No. Export your product. $1 million of copper, $1 million comes into your bank account. It's yours, not government. It belongs to you. But because it's in Zanaco, you and I who want to buy a minibus and a harvester and a hammer mill, we are going to use your money. Because when it's sitting in the bank, it's available to the economy. So that is how banking works.
Wouldn't it have been good to actually, instead of saying reform the FISIP program, and that, wouldn't it have been great if the IMF proposed a reform in the mining sector as opposed to the FISIP program?
That is wishful thinking. Remember, you fight people for independence. We started in the 1950s, 55, somewhere there. We managed to kick out the British in 1964. You cannot go back to the same people who you fought and kick them out to say, now can you come and advise me? Because I was going to advise you to become a slave the way you were before. You get my point? So to expect Western representatives to make us independent economically is a tall order, because it's not in their interests. You and me, we have got workers working for us, cleaning our homes. When are you going to say, no, I think my domestic worker needs to have a good life just like me.
No, I'm upgrading you.
I'm upgrading to 10,000 per month. You can't. You want him to remain on the bread line so that when he's in the buana the whole day. You see what I mean? And that is the way trade and commerce tends to work. So this will not happen. We have to just have the courage to change it. And again, there's a lot of good experiences you can learn from countries like China.
Yes.
Who, China was the second or third poorest nation in the world in the early 1950s. By 2021, 2022, it's the largest producer in the world. You have to ask yourself, what did they do? How did they fight colonialism? How did they fight Western domination? Huh? And even when we do our homework and try to find out how they did it, you'll find there are some useful lessons that we can learn and that we can use. I'm not here to talk about China, so we will not discuss further than that.
Anyway, even India is projected to be, I think, in 2030, it's projected to be the second largest economy or third.
India, 2 days ago, surpassed the United Kingdom. It's now the 5th largest economy in the world.
Yeah. No, I see that, and I visited both China and India.
Yes.
But I've got Indian blood in me, right? So, but, let's call a spade a spade. India will never catch up with China.
It will never.
Yeah, because India follows the European development agenda. China has got an independent Chinese agenda. In China, you will not see people in a market making mbaulas or whatever. You find them in India. Go to India, in the markets, they're just like our markets. Somebody's making door frames, window frames. In China, immediately they see that there's an industry here. They formalize it very quickly. They quickly turn it into a small-scale industry that is supported by government. There'll be machinery provided, the big ones which you can't buy as an SME. Cutting steel, huge cranes. Those you hire from government.
And they actually even drop the price down because the production is...
Yeah, so what tends to happen is what looks like a cottage industry in India becomes a major industry in China because of government investment in its people and in those industries.
Director, let's look if there are any last messages. Maybe from Rwanda, has IMF program helped any country in the world to improve the livelihood of the ordinary people? Thank you, Richard Silishewo Moto, Mpatamato, Rwanda. Good evening, Mr. DODIA. I'm enjoying the program. I'm a senior citizen. My question is, was it necessary for Zambia to borrow money from the IMF? This time around, when the national resources are in abundance, such as gold, emeralds, nickel, and other than copper. Mwonga from Mamba. Good evening. The minister said duty, VAT, excise duty will be reintroduced. Is it an IMF condition, and if so, this will not make fuel prices high? Mumba from Kitwe. Good evening, panel. Is IMF bailout package or a support program? Look at Kenya. How much debt? 68 billion. Your take on this one, Mr. DODIA. Is it a bailout or a support program? Good evening. I'm following the program indeed. Currently, it's difficult for SMEs to grow due to many licenses. What advice can you give to the authorities to allow some to grow? Sichewe.
Great. Clearly, I will continue to preach that the role of government is to look after its people. And you can run a very big business. A country is a big business. And in any big business, you'll get a Sri Lankan chief accountant. You'll get maybe a South African fleet manager. But your dunderhead son and daughter, who are chakolwas in the bar, they are the ones who are going to inherit the business when you die. So if you are foolish, you leave them to be drunkards. If you are smart, you are going to invest in them because you know that one day they have to take over. The Sri Lankan is not going to take over. The South African is not going to. These are expatriates. They've come here to work. They are going to leave. It's your children who are going to inherit. And that's the same thing with a country. The Zambian people are the ones who are going to inherit this economy when we are gone. We need to make them stronger and better and make them operate more efficiently so that from generation to generation, the quality of the economy gets better and better because the quality of the people improves with time. And so we need to invest in our own people. So most of the questions which have been asked from our colleagues out there, yes, we need to invest in our own people. We need to grow them. And the IMF package, as I said, it's a package which unfortunately we are like in intensive care. And you need that medicine to keep you alive so that you can live to fight another day. And that's why it has been necessary for us to get this package. But it's a short-term package for 2-3 years. After that, we have to have had a developed package of our own to keep us going forward. In terms of looking to the future, I think a lot of it is, let's start trying to use our own domestic resources. Too often, we spend so much time engaging with the outside world that we begin to forget what is happening on the ground within our own countries. In other countries, an ambassador from a foreign country will never even meet the president.
Never once.
And
credentials, if
yes.
you are lucky, if the president is available, but it's the finance minister who is even going to. Yes.
But in Africa, this is the norm. Every new high commissioner, consular will meet the president. Now, we are polite, we are very nice people. But in this mechanism, what we do is we undermine our leadership. I have been to conferences across the world, in Switzerland, in Qatar, in London, in the United States, in Johannesburg, in Nairobi. And I've seen how our ministers go to these international conferences and they are scared to speak their minds. Why? It's because the person who's listening to them is the US ambassador, or the British High Commissioner, or the French ambassador, or the Italian ambassador. And they know that that person has the phone number for my head of state. If I say something in this meeting which they don't like, and they are giving us a $5 million support package, a phone call will be made to State House. And before I reach in Lusaka, I'm fired. So we undermine the capacity of our people to perform their duties because the people who they are working with have access to the higher authority. And this is not a very conducive environment for countries to develop. Even if you look at companies, if the managing director is talking to the driver and not talking through HR, that driver gets power. Yes. Even starts to threaten the HR. I can fire you. The boss, I know him. You see? And we've seen this happen. So we need to make sure that our governance structures make sense. We need to make sure that our accountability structures make sense so that people who are employed are compelled to do their jobs and they are compelled to produce results. Somebody who's erring, stolen, $50 million thing, throw the police at them. If that person ends up in prison, so be it. We have to run a very, very tight ship for the next 5 to 10 years if we're going to come out of this problem.
Mr. DODIA, thank you very much. You are watching Economic Briefcase on Camnet TV. Today we are discussing the IMF and its alternatives. I'm sure you have learned 5 or 10 things. On a personal level, I've learned a lot. And, I've started thinking that in this country, we actually have hope. Today with you was me, Lubin Tabazoka, your host for the program, and my colleague, Mr. Noah Njapao, and our guest, Mr. YOUSUF DODIA. Continue watching Camnet TV. Watch us next week as we bring to you yet another topic. Those that did not manage to call in, sorry. My operator was running to go home. See you next week.